you're watching this video, you probably drafted the wrong wide receivers in fantasy football, but that's okay, because most people do. But the good news is that there's 5 wide receivers available in the majority of leagues right now on the waiver wires that you can pick up and improve your squad. So in this video, we'll break down those 5 wide receivers. And if you're not familiar, I'm Sal Vetri. I've been helping people win their fantasy leagues for nearly 8 years, and I plan to do the same for you in this video. And let's start with Marquise Hollywood Brown, a member of the Kansas City Chiefs. And the reason why I'm bringing this guy up at this point right now, by the time that you're watching this, it's been a couple of days since we got some pretty massive news about Rashee Rice, and that's why we're saying Marquise Brown is somebody you need to add. Because Rashee Rice, as it was expected, would be suspended, and people thought maybe mid-season, but he ends up saying, you know what, I'll just serve this suspension and take a 6-game suspension to start the season. Now, the team, and there were some reports out there that the NFL wanted double-digit games, maybe 10-plus games, and that they weren't going to settle for anything less than 6 games. So Rashee Rice's team might have just said, hey, instead of getting 8 to 10-plus games, let's just take the 6 to start the year. We'll be good for the home stretch of the regular season. So now that Rashee Rice is not going to be out there for the first 6 weeks of the season, well, what does this mean? It means that there's going to be a pretty valuable role in this offense open. Rashee Rice last year before injury was playing over 40% of his snaps, 43% to be exact, out of the slot. And we saw as the season went on last year, Xavier Worthy stepped into that role towards the end of the season and saw a lot of production. That slot role in this Chiefs offense with Patrick Mahomes the last few seasons has been very valuable, even dating back to Tyreek Hill when he often played out of the slot. So when you look at who's left on this team, obviously Xavier Worthy makes sense as a clear-cut fit. He was in that role to end last year. Let's just put him back in it this year. And I do think we're going to see a lot of that those first 6 weeks of the season. And I do think Xavier Worthy as like a 5th-round fantasy pick now or a 6th-round pick. Usually the 5th round is a very valuable player for those first 6 weeks of the season. But Marquise Brown has played the slot in the past. We saw him get some of this usage in the postseason last year. I wouldn't be shocked if he also sees a little bit of an uptick in slot usage. And at the end of the day, Marquise Brown really did not get a good run of things last year. Basically on like the second route that he ran in the preseason of 2024, he hurt his shoulder and he was out for the entire season. Sure, he came out to close the season and played in the playoffs, but he just wasn't himself. It makes sense. He never got any reps with this offense since he got hurt in the preseason. He had 15 targets in 2 games, 7.5 targets per game, 45 yards per game, 4.5 catches per game. For the most part, really, if you're getting 9 fantasy points per game over 2 games, who cares? It's not even really worth bringing up. You didn't really get any time to gel with this offense, but now he's had an entire offseason with the team because despite not really playing with them last year, they said, you know what, let's re-up him. The Chiefs signed Hollywood Brown this offseason to another one-year deal. That's what he got last year, this time for $11 million. And look, it makes sense. The free agency market had nobody. Davante Adams basically wasn't available. Josh Palmer was the 2nd highest paid free agent wide receiver, right? So it makes sense that Marquise Hollywood Brown is going to come out here and the Chiefs say, you know what, he fits this offense. We like what he gives us. Maybe they thought that there might actually be this suspension looming all the way back in March when they ended up signing Hollywood Brown, and they said that could be a top 2 receiver for us. And now that's reality as we enter 2025. And I really don't want to just look at last year when it comes to Hollywood Brown because he's been a good receiver. He's a veteran receiver in the NFL, right? Obviously only plays 2 games last year, but every single year before that, basically 100 plus targets. The big season in 2021 when he was a wide receiver 1 for the Baltimore Ravens with 145, 100 plus targets in 2020. If we look at that season specifically back in 2021 with the Ravens, he was a clear-cut number 1 receiver. This is even when Mark Andrews was in the prime of his career. You still had Marquise Hollywood Brown ranking top 10 with the Ravens, averaging over 9 targets per game, a very strong 27% target share, was operating downfield, was operating at times out of the slot as well. And he just showed that he could be a valuable receiver. Now, again, that was years ago. It's a totally different offense now, but this offense does have Patrick Mahomes behind an improved offensive line, still has Andy Reid, doesn't have Rashee Rice for 6 games. Like, it's at least worth being on your roster, maybe even a flex option to start the season, and Marquise Brown's available in the far majority of leagues, over 50%. That's why he's in this video. And I do think the offensive line is important to call out because last year for the Chiefs, outside of the obvious injuries to Hollywood Brown and Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce regressing a little bit and not being in as good of shape football shape-wise, the offensive line was the biggest problem for them. You saw that in the Super Bowl once again, and you can see right here, this is what we're looking at. You can see Josh Simmons. Josh Simmons was a late 1st-round pick. He fell due to some injuries, and apparently he's been a stud in the Chiefs training camp. And if that's going to be the case, and their offensive line has improved this year, and they're getting back some wide receivers, well, this offense can really start to look like a couple years ago when Patrick Mahomes was easily one of the top fantasy options at QB. So yes, when you have a guy who has 4.3 speed, not only in Xavier Worthy, but you also have a 4.3 Marquise Brown, I do think if you put that guy into the slot a little bit, let him work open space like we saw at glimpses when he was a member of the Ravens and he was a member of the Cardinals at times. I think Hollywood Brown fits this role nicely, even if it's just 30% of the time out of the slot. So given the news about Rashee Rice, it's shocking to me. Obviously, this number I would think is going to go up, but Hollywood Brown, according to, I'm using Yahoo right here, he's only rostered in 17% of leagues as of this recording. Again, I do think this number is going to go up, especially as more fantasy teams are drafted and more teams start to look at the waiver wire. Maybe it goes up to like 30, 35%, but he should easily be rostered now in over 50% of leagues. Because if you're a top 2 wide receiver option for Patrick Mahomes for at least 6 weeks of the season, right, then Rashee Rice will come back and we'll see what happens with his role. But at least 6 weeks of the season, off the waiver wire, if I can get a wide receiver 2 or flex option in Hollywood Brown and I'm getting 6 to 8 targets a game from Andy Reid and a Patrick Mahomes offense, that feels good. And the same is definitely true for this next player. I can't believe he's available in over 50% of leagues. Before we get into him, hit the subscribe button. It takes 2 seconds. I greatly appreciate it as we aim towards our goal of 200,000 subscribers. If you find these videos helpful, make sure to hit the button. Now, that guy that I'm kind of surprised is available in over 50% of leagues, but I get why, is Darnell Mooney of the Atlanta Falcons. Now, this one is simple. This guy had a very strong 2024 season. He got a pretty large contract given his recent play with the Bears before last year when he went to Atlanta, and he kind of lived up to it. Because in his first year with Atlanta, despite really bad quarterback play for the majority of that time with Kirk Cousins, he was able to earn nearly 7 targets per game, a 21% target share. Okay, that's the usage as the wide receiver 2 next to Drake London. Despite missing some time as well later in the season, he still had nearly 1,000 yards. 62 per game is very strong, especially if this guy's available in over 50% of leagues right now. 64 receptions as well. Like, this was a very strong game. This is a guy who ended up finishing the season despite being banged up in week 17 and week 18, leaving a game early, missing a game with basically 1,000 yards. And what really stood out was exactly how he was used. Drake London was put into the slot a lot, moved in motion as this bigger slot option in the middle of the field, while Darnell Mooney worked the intermediate parts of the field. Mooney had over 1,300 air yards, ranking top 20 in the NFL, and 24 deep targets, which was top 10. So he was that downfield role in this offense for Kirk Cousins, who really wasn't throwing downfield coming off of the Achilles injury last year. You could see from Fantasy Points data on Twitter, they say the most games of over 100 air yards last season, Darnell Mooney had 7. He had 7. He was tied with DK Metcalf, Jerry Jeudy, Nico Collins. There was only 4 other wide receivers who had more games of 100 air yards. And again, keep in mind, Darnell Mooney left 1 game early and he missed another game due to an injury. The reason why this is important to call out is now he's going from Kirk Cousins to Michael Penix, who is known for his bigger arm and can maybe actually connect on more of these downfield shots to Mooney, leading to more explosive plays and fantasy points. And he also had the production that matched. This is according to Player Profiler, the fantasy points per game for Darnell Mooney last year. He had the stinker in week 1, but then he gives you a top 20 finish. You scroll down, he had 15 fantasy points. He's a top 30 receiver. You scroll down, another top 15 finish, top 12, top 20. I mean, if you go through this again, here's another one with 20 fantasy points. Towards the end of the year with Michael Penix, he gets 13 fantasy points. He had 6 different weeks when he was a top 20 receiver. He had 8 different games where he had at least 13 fantasy points. 13 fantasy points is definitely a strong flex option. It's a wide receiver 2 for you. And this guy was producing in more than half of his games wide receiver 2 production and is now on majority of waiver wires. Again, that was with Kirk Cousins for the majority of those games. Kirk Cousins, who last season was tied for the league in interceptions. His accuracy, especially downfield, was not strong. He only threw multiple touchdown passes in 4 total games. He went a stretch last year where he couldn't find the end zone in terms of touchdown passes. But then we got to see a little bit of some games. These are the game logs according to ESPN of Michael Penix towards the end of the year. Again, it's a very small 2-game sample with Darnell Mooney before he ended up getting hurt. In the first game with Penix, 5 catches for 82 yards, very good. The second game, 2 catches, 37 yards. He gets hurt in that game. He does not then play in week 18. But in this one game where he started and finished the game without an injury, 5 catches, 82 yards. Again, it's a super small sample. We're talking about one game here. But we got to see averaging 16 yards per reception before he left early in week 17, averaging 18.5 yards per reception. That's what we can get out of Darnell Mooney. More accurate deep targets with Michael Penix, hopefully. And when you look at the team competition this year, really nothing has changed for Atlanta. A little bit of shuffling, of course, on the offensive line. They lose Drew Thalman. They had an injury in the preseason to their offensive line. But in terms of competition, it's still Drake London the 1, Darnell Mooney, Ray McCloud. In terms of tight end competition, it's still, as of right now, as it's currently reported, Kyle Pitts. I don't think he's going to get traded at this point. Still the same backfield, just the quarterback's changing, and we hope that there's an upgrade there. So we can still expect probably somewhere around that 20% target share, maybe more for Darnell Mooney. If you're going to get similar amount of targets, 6 to 7 per game like he averaged last year, and now they're just going to be more accurate and maybe more downfield, that feels good. Now, I know why Darnell Mooney dropped in drafts. As you can see, Hayden Winks points out right here in terms of draft season, this is where his ADP was going. This line right here, he was going around like the 85th overall player, and then he completely plummeted all the way down to the 105th overall player at the wide receiver position, or overall, rarely drafted now. And the reason is because of a shoulder injury that he suffered early on in camp. This injury ended up keeping out for basically all of training camp. There wasn't a ton of reports, but we did get some movement from the Atlanta Falcons that lead you to believe that Mooney should be ready for the beginning of the season. Now, maybe by the time you're watching this, we get a status update on him that he's hopefully going to be ready, not going to be getting put on IR or anything. But as you can see right here, they did sign after the injury originally DJ DJ Chark. They signed the veteran receiver, but then after a couple of weeks, they released him. And as I say here on Twitter, they signed him a few weeks ago once Darnell Mooney went down with the shoulder injury. This might be an indication, since they're releasing DJ Chark, that Mooney is close to returning. Otherwise, your only wide receiver that you trust on this team is Drake London, and then like Ray McCloud. I think they would have kept DJ Chark, who somewhat profiles out like a Darnell Mooney field stretcher on the outside, on the roster if they were concerned that Mooney was going to miss 4+ games. So when we piece all of this together, and I see that Darnell Mooney is currently available in over 50% of leagues, he's only rostered in 46%. So depending on the platform you use, he's available in about 55% of leagues or so. That feels really good right now. I'd rather have him over, I don't know. I mean, Brandon Ayuk you could obviously put in your flex spot, but there's some other guys up here that Darnell Mooney just feels better than at this point. I mean, it's going to feel pretty crazy when you say names like Cooper Kupp and things like that, but Darnell Mooney at this point, if we're talking wide receiver twos on offenses, I'd rather have the wide receiver two in the Atlanta offense with Michael Penix and Zach Robinson calling the plays than the wide receiver two in a Cooper Kupp offense with a new offensive coordinator, a new quarterback there in Sam Darnold. Like, just give me Darnell Mooney. Now, when it comes to week 1 of the season, if you want to see my top 50 overall flex rankings, not only for week 1, but the entire season, you can get it completely free, link down below, or you can just head to flexrankings.com. That is flexrankings.com. That will take you to this page where you just enter your email, and then I'll send you the flex rankings. Be sure to check your spam and especially promotional folders. Sometimes they land in there, and that'll send you for week 1 and the entire year my top 50 overall flex rankings to make sure that you're setting the best lineups you possibly can for week 1 and the entire year. But if you're in a serious fantasy league and you want my full top 250 overall rankings, my waiver wire tiers and fab budget recommendations, matchup notes for every important player, and a whole lot more, that's exactly why I built the Fantasy Blueprint and all the in-season tools from week 1 to championship week. It's what I use in all my leagues, and over 10,000 people currently use in their leagues. If you're not already a member of the Blueprint, you could click the link in the description below, or you can type in jointheblueprint.com. That'll take you to this page, and you can learn more about all the in-season tools that you'll be getting every single week. This is not just week to week. This is every single week up until your championship week. And then you can also head in here and you can read some of the testimonials as well as you scroll through. Some of the people who were in last year are now back this year. Nearly 90% of people who signed up last year are back this year, which I just think goes to show that this is a quality product if that many people return. So if you want all the tools every single week of the season to help you smack around your friends this year and make them wonder, how did this guy get so good at fantasy? You can check the link in the description or head to jointheblueprint.com. That is jointheblueprint.com. Now, the next receiver I'm targeting on waiver wires right now, and I think that it's a shame that he's available in over 50% of leagues and people are sleeping on him because he's sort of a boring pick, is Christian Kirk of the Houston Texans, formerly of the division rival, the Jaguars. People wrote this guy off last season, and I get it. When you look back at his game logs, none of them stand out. It wasn't a 1,000-yard receiver, but he probably would have been because he got hurt. He only played in 8 games. I mean, Christian Kirk was averaging 6 targets per game in an offense that at that point did have or had a Trevor Lawrence, right? And then he ends up getting hurt as well. He was averaging about a 20% target share. This was in an offense where Brian Thomas was breaking out, where Evan Ingram was seeing a ton of short targets when he was healthy, right? So the guy only ends up averaging 1 touchdown. He only ends up having 27 catches, 379 yards. None of this is great, right? But when you go back to the last time that we saw a healthy Christian Kirk entering a season as a clear top 2 option in an offense, it was 2022, which seems like forever ago now. But when he had that opportunity, and he's going into an offense right now that he is the number 2 option with Nico Collins taking over all the defensive attention, 84 catches, over 1,100 yards. It was a career year for him. He ended up having in that season a very strong 133 targets. That's 7.8 targets per game, a 23% target share. This is a guy who currently on the Texans roster, based on all the usage we saw in camp in the preseason, will be in 2 wide receiver sets to start the season and probably slide into the slot in 3 wide receiver sets where we saw guys like Stefon Diggs have a great role last year. And speaking of Stefon Diggs, he's no longer on this team. He's currently the wide receiver 1 for the New England Patriots. And also Tank Dell is expected to miss the entire season. We don't know when he's going to be back. So like I mentioned, as of right now, the starting offense for this team is Nico Collins at wide receiver and Christian Kirk. Jaden Higgins played behind Christian Kirk in the preseason pretty clearly. It was Kirk, the veteran that they trusted out there in 2 wide receiver sets. It was Kirk who was seeing some usage in 3 wide receiver sets out of the slot. And oh yeah, they're probably going to have to lean on this passing attack a little bit more, which is a little bit scary because the offensive line is not the same. It was bad last year. Now they lose Laramie Tunsil, but Joe Mixon is already going to miss the first 4 games of the season. And any quotes we're getting on from the team, they're not committing that he's going to be back week 5. They're basically just saying, we'll reevaluate it then. There's some reports out there that Joe Mixon could miss the entire season for what is the reports right now are like, okay, there's rumors. So we should clarify these are rumors, not official reports, is that he had some sort of surgery that the team did not approve. That's why he was on the non-football injury list. And the surgery kind of got somewhat botched. I don't know the exact details, but because of that, he's missing the first 4 games, might miss the entire season. So now your running backs are going to be some combination of Nick Chubb, kind of gross, Dameon Pierce, kind of gross, and a rookie Woody Marks. We'll see what his upside is, but they're probably not going to be running the ball a whole lot, at least efficiently. So if they're going to pass the ball a lot more, especially out of 3 wide receiver sets, and Christian Kirk is being deemed the slot demon by some of the defensive backs on his own team this year, that's where you can start to see the Stefon Diggs role from last year. And look, Stefon Diggs obviously ends up getting hurt, but he only played in 7 completed games last year. And what did he do? He had 3 touchdowns. He had 47 catches in 7 completed games, 500 yards. He was pacing to be a 1,000-yard wide receiver last year while while competing with Tank Dell and Nico Collins to start the year. He was pacing to have about 7 touchdowns. He was pacing to have somewhere around 90 receptions. That was Stefon Diggs in this role last year. Now Christian Kirk is entering it a little bit healthy, a little bit younger. So when I look at Christian Kirk, I get that he's not the sexy option when you put him in your flex spot. You're like, oof, like this doesn't feel all that great. But for him to be available right now, he's only rostered in 38% of leagues, available in 62%. At worst, if you're in a 10 to 12 man league with 6 bench spots, especially your 12 man leagues, this is a guy who should be on your bench. We know Nico Collins has suffered injuries each of the past 2 years. If he was to go down, Christian Kirk's the number 1 receiver in a CJ Stroud offense. That offense would probably struggle, but he'd still be the number 1 target. Now the next guy I want to talk about is Josh Palmer, and this one might feel a little bit deep, and yes, you probably need to be in a 12-team format with at least 6 bench spots here, maybe 5, but this is a guy who this offseason, he's kind of being forgotten about. He left the Chargers after a forgettable 2024 season, but as I referenced earlier when talking about Marquise Brown, Josh Palmer, here's some bar trivia for you, the second highest paid free agent wide receiver this offseason. $13 million per year, $36 million in total, or it might have been $12 million per year, only behind Devontae Adams. So the Bills wanted this guy. Again, there were limited options on the market, but they still chose Palmer to give that contract too. Now Palmer last year, nothing crazy, just 4 targets per game, a 15% target share while competing with Ladd McConkey, while Palmer was dealing with his own injuries, while they were still giving Quentin Johnston a lot of looks last year to see if he had anything left in the tank on an offense that wanted to run the ball. Herbert threw less than 30 times per game. So yeah, there's a reason why Josh Palmer didn't stand out all that much. But if you go back to 2022, the last time Josh Palmer was healthy, got some opportunities with guys like Mike Williams and Keenan Allen hurt, and the Chargers were actually throwing the ball more. We did see some flashes out of Palmer. The guy averaged almost 7 targets per game, believe it or not. He had over 100 targets that year, 17% target share. He was never a great wide receiver by any means this season, but if you go down and you look at it, he does have a 72 catch receptions, or had 72 receptions in 2022 on his resume, which you might not think. He only ended up having like 10 yards per reception. The goal here is that now he's attached to a much better offense with a better quarterback in Josh Allen, who wants to throw the ball downfield, but who is going to be his option? They're hoping it's Keon Coleman in year 2, but also Josh Palmer should be out there in 3 wide receiver sets. By all accounts, he's had a good training camp, and again, just a reminder, they signed him to a 3-year deal worth $36 million, and if we look at the current roster right now, like Khalil Shakur suffered a high ankle sprain. They're saying he should be ready by week 1, but we just saw Tajay Spears suffer a high ankle sprain a month before the season, and he got put on IR and is going to miss a month. So these high ankle sprains can be pretty tedious. If you come back too early, you re-injure it, you're out another month. But even when you do come back, you're probably not going to be yourself for another 2 to 3 weeks. So I don't think Khalil Shakir is going to be ready until maybe the first week 3, week 4 of the season, even if he is out there active. I'm saying 100% himself. And Khalil Shakir was like the security blanket for Josh Allen. So if he's not 100%, or if he does miss time, somebody else is going to have to step up. The guy he gave a lot of money standing out in the preseason, and Josh Palmer, who's available on so many waiver wires, is not a terrible option to consider. All the training camp reports have been nice on Palmer. He missed a couple of days with an injury at some point in camp, but for the most part, he came back and he looked the same. Wide receiver Josh Palmer has been a magnet for Josh Allen during training camp, is one report that came out. Okay, obviously with Khalil Shakir injured, that's going to be the case. Best average separation on vertically breaking routes in 2024 last year. Some studs like Nico Collins and Brian Thomas up top. Number 3 was Josh Palmer in terms of getting separation on vertically breaking routes. Now, these separation stats can be a little bit weird. Was the defense playing off coverage, that type of stuff, but just overall in general, it's something to look at. He was top 3 in this metric. And of course, like we mentioned, his quarterback is now going to be Josh Allen, somebody who loves throwing the ball downfield. I mean, if you look at it right now, Josh Allen last season, if we pull this up for Josh Allen, he ranks 2nd in the NFL in deep attempts. Okay, so if he's going to throw the ball a ton deep this year, you know who's maybe a nice option to target? This guy, Josh Palmer, who was getting separation on those routes last year against man coverage, which is normally when you're going to take some of your shots. You're probably not going to take a lot of shots against 2 high safeties, but against man coverage last year, Josh Palmer had a 27% targets per route run rate, meaning that he was getting separation, getting open, compared to Keon Coleman, just 14%. Okay, the 14% could be a rookie struggling to get open. We kind of knew this about Keon Coleman's profile, and it kind of continued into his rookie year before the injury. I'm not going to say Josh Palmer is going to finish as a top 20 wide receiver, but I wouldn't be shocked if he finishes as a top 36 wide receiver, which is definitely a flex option depending on the matchup for you, and he's only currently rostered in 20% of leagues, meaning he's 80% available. Look, you're not going to be dropping some legitimate wide receivers to go ahead and pick up a Josh Palmer, right? I'd rather have Christian Kirk. He's a top 2 option right away, where Palmer is kind of figuring out his spot in the offense this year, but 80% available, depending on the league you're in, especially if you're in a 14-man league, shouldn't be available. Now, we've talked about some players in this video, guys like Marquise Brown, guys like Christian Kirk, and I actually like them to go for more than their receiving yard totals this year, especially when you're talking about somebody like Marquise Brown, who if Rashee Rice misses 6 to 8 games this year, he's going to have a lot more opportunity. And since we're talking about making picks, I'm teaming up with DraftKings Pick 6 this year for week 1 to give you a shot at their biggest bag ever. Right now, all DraftKings Pick 6 customers can play for free for a shot at a cut of $1 million or more. are. Pick more or less on 6 player stats, share it with your crew because the more people that play, the bigger the bag grows, and if you hit all 6, you are in for a share of over $1 million. So if you want to play along, download the DraftKings Pick 6 app, sign up using my promo code SAL, and claim your free token today. Simply put, let's build this bag together. Now, the final player I want to talk about is somebody who, for the most part, like maybe this guy will just be, you pick him up, he's off your roster by week 2, but there's a chance that you can get a lot of boom out of Cedric Tillman this year as he's a part of the Cleveland Browns offense, especially to start the year while his quarterback is going to be right now Joe Flacco. Because most people will just look at his line from last year in 2024, and we'll pull it up right now, and they'll just see, 29 catches, just 2 per game, 339 yards, 30 receiving yards per game. Okay, like so many wide receivers did this last year, they shouldn't even be worth mentioning in a fantasy video, and they're going to write Cedric Tillman off, but there's a lot of context we have to break down about his 2024 season. For starters, if we look at the game logs according to Player Profiler for Cedric Tillman, you can see right here, week 1, he's only playing 32% of the snaps, and then you scroll down here, 33%. 31, 13, all the way up until week 7, it spikes from 37%, so he's playing like 30% a week, to 80+% of the snaps, then 90%. Why this spike? That's exactly when Amari Cooper got traded. He went from being a backup to Amari Cooper to then being a starting wide receiver in 2 and 3 wide receiver sets. So for the first, as we see right here, 6 weeks of the season, you can't hold that against him. He was operating as a backup. But then he ended up getting to take over as a starting receiver, X receiver on the outside from week 7 to 11. He got to play with Jameis Winston during that time before he suffered a concussion. And man, oh man, Cedric Tillman produced. I mean, he was one of like the hottest ads in terms of fantasy. People were trying to trade left and right for him as he was going into his bye week. He ended up in those 4 games before the bye week, before suffering the concussion, averaging 18.5 fantasy points per game. He was like a top 12 wide receiver during this time. An insane 10 targets per game, 76 yards per game. This was the Jameis Winston stimulus pack that came through during that stretch when they got rid of Deshaun Watson, Amari Cooper was gone, and Cedric Tillman was flourishing. You could even look right here at Matt Harmon's reception perception. Like, it wasn't just the overwhelming amount of volume going his way from Jameis Winston, but also, as you can see right here, some of the highlights on what he was doing on the film that Matt Harmon does a great job on reception perception. Be sure to break it down checking out. He said he thrived once given a true X receiver alignment, 70% success rate versus man coverage is solid, and a notable contested catch and in-space results. So he was saying that this guy on film also looked good. It wasn't just the overwhelming amount of volume going his way. As you can see right here, according to Fantasy Points data, as we mentioned, he was averaging 18.6 fantasy points per game in his 4 healthy games post the Amari Cooper trade, and a 26% first read target share, meaning that the first read that Jameis Winston looked at during that time was Tillman, and he would throw him the ball. He was a priority in the offense. If you get first read targets, it means they're scheming around you, or you're just a good player and your quarterback wants to throw to you. Now, the problem for Cedric Tillman was he had that concussion and it lingered. It was a serious concussion. You've seen guys, obviously Tua, Chris Olave, miss a lot of time with this. That's what happened with Cedric Tillman. He missed a lot of time, and then he came back and Jameis Winston was gone, and he was playing with terrible quarterbacks. But this is a legitimate X wide receiver, 6'3", 213 pounds, has speed, has contested catchability like we saw and like Matt Harmon broke down as well. I mean, he profiles out, if you're talking about like size, speed, how his play style is, he's not nearly as good as Nico Collins, but that's the type of player he profiles out as. And his competition is basically just Jerry Jeudy. Like, he's the only competition right now for target to the wide receiver position. Tillman should be running his routes probably more downfield on the outside. Jeudy probably more the short to intermediate routes. Deontay Johnson was cut. Like, you're going to tell me that Jamari Thrash is the wide receiver 3. Obviously, we know they're going to play a lot of 2 tight end sets. Harold Fannin, David Njoku, those guys will see targets. But in terms of like the number 1 option downfield for Joe Flacco, who at this point in his career loves throwing the ball downfield, we've seen that the last 2 seasons, is going to be Cedric Tillman. And it's important to call out Joe Flacco because we actually have a sample back in 2023 of Joe Flacco on the Cleveland Browns. We don't have him with a sample with Cedric Tillman, but we do have him with the sample of Amari Cooper. And if we look at Amari Cooper's game logs during that time when he had Joe Flacco as his quarterback, this is the beginning of the year, just to kind of give you some context on Player Profiler. Amari Cooper, right, he had that first game of the season in 2023, 6 fantasy points. You scroll down though, the final month of the season, 13 fantasy points, 21, a 51-point game. Remember that, league winning Amari Cooper in 2023, and then 10 points. Yeah, I'll take that type of boomer bust upside out of a guy who's available on the majority of waiver wires right now. That was Amari playing this X receiver role for Joe Flacco. Of course, it's a different offense 2 years later, same team though, and now Cedric Tillman's getting more volume. So when I look at this, in terms of all the players we've talked about in this video, the one with the biggest upside is actually Cedric Tillman, because he already has the starting role with limited competition, and he's an X outside receiver available right now. He's only rostered in 19% of leagues, available in over 80% of leagues. This would be the guy that I actually want to kind of just hang on to and see what happens the first weeks of the season, because if Joe Flacco looks decent at all, you're probably going to get like 6 to 8 targets at the X receiver downfield for Cedric Tillman, who showed last year he's talented. So these are 5 wide receivers you can add right now to either improve your bench and see how the season goes, or maybe even be a flex option for you right away. Now, if you want to see the running back version of this video, and these guys can really break out, especially at the running back position, you can check out this video right here. There are 5 guys who are available on the waiver wires right now who probably should not be.